And I just want to say, you see, this my belt for my coach, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. Many years ago, he told me, just training hard and you gonna be champion. And I want to give this belt. This is him and his father make me, I know.
There are men born to follow, and then there are those carved by fire to lead legacies beyond comprehension. Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov wasn't just a father, coach, or strategist. He was the unseen general behind one of the most unstoppable forces in combat sports. You see the warriors now, Dagestan's iron-born fighters mauling the best of the best. But what you don't see is the relentless architect, the mastermind who forged them with a vision no one dared dream. His mission was never about fame. It was about legacy, honor, and elevating his people from the shadows of obscurity into the spotlight of domination. Before the world heard of Dagestan or even whispered the name Khabib Nurmagomedov with reverence, Abdulmanap was planting seeds on the unforgiving soil of the Caucasus. While others chased medals, he crafted men, not just athletes, but disciplined warriors molded in mountain gyms with nothing but grit, repetition, and sacrifice. His training methods weren't born in modern labs, they were forged in the crucible of hardship. To understand his genius, you need to look beyond his son's undefeated record and into the philosophy that created an army. In his world, talent was meaningless without purpose, and purpose was everything. He wasn't just teaching techniques. Abdulmanap was instilling ideology, military-level discipline fused with spiritual resolve. His fighters weren't there to entertain. They were sent into the octagon as extensions of Dagestan's pride. He had a brutal honesty that cut deeper than any punch. If you wanted comfort, you were in the wrong place. If you wanted greatness, he'd take you to the edge of human endurance and then ask for more. And those who endured it emerged not only champions, but symbols of a culture that refused to be ignored. His system was built on foundations others couldn't even see. Wrestling in Dagestan isn't just a sport, it's survival. In the remote, rugged mountains where modern comforts are rare, young boys are taught that strength and discipline are non-negotiable. Abdulmanap recognized this not as a challenge, but as a gift. He didn't need luxury gyms or fancy diets. He had the Caucasus, tradition, and a belief system so potent it birthed monsters. He'd take 10-year-olds and give them the mindset of seasoned warriors. If you asked him when training started, he'd say, "From the cradle." That's not metaphor. It's how deeply embedded this was in the Nurmagomedov doctrine. The genius of Abdulmanap wasn't just in physical preparation, it was in psychological warfare. He studied Soviet sports science, combat strategy, and Islamic teachings, blending them into a mental framework that broke opponents before a punch was even thrown. He taught that humility was armor and ego was poison. His fighters didn't taunt, they conquered in silence. He knew that the real fight was not in the cage, it was in the mind. And once you won that battle, the rest was execution. This wasn't just coaching, it was psychological programming for elite, unshakable dominance. But behind every iron rule was a heart that burned with purpose. Abdulmanap wasn't brutal for the sake of cruelty. He was relentless because he saw what others couldn't. He knew his fighters were carrying the hope of a forgotten land, a land that had been ravaged by war, poverty, and political neglect. He turned adversity into fuel. Where others saw obstacles, he saw a forge. Every loss was a lesson, every victory a responsibility. He didn't raise fighters to collect belts. He raised them to represent generations of struggle and survival. His blueprint wasn't just for champions, it was for legends. And yet his own journey was marked by battles that would have broken most men. Born in 1962, Abdulmanap grew up in the Soviet system where opportunities were few and discipline was forced. But he embraced the grind, mastering judo, sambo, and wrestling with a hunger to rise. He served in the Soviet military, absorbing tactical discipline that would later become a key ingredient in his coaching formula. He returned home not to chase his own glory, but to lift others. The young men of Dagestan weren't just students to him, they were a mission to prove that greatness could be homegrown. He started with nothing, bare gyms, limited funding, and outdated equipment. But he had an idea. that in Dagestan, boys could become better than anyone in the world. All they needed was belief, repetition, and someone willing to push them past their limits. He became that someone. Year after year, he honed his craft. His house became a training camp, his family a fighting dynasty. His methods were questioned, even criticized, but results silenced every doubt. He wasn't interested in temporary fame. He was building a system designed to endure for generations, one where discipline, respect, and faith were non-negotiable. And then came Khabib. A child born into fire, raised under an iron regime of discipline few could comprehend. Abdulmanap trained him like a soldier from the beginning. No shortcuts, no praise for mediocrity. When Khabib wrestled a bear as a boy, the world was shocked. Abdulmanap wasn't. To him, it was just another day. He didn't want Khabib to be the best in Dagestan. He wanted him to be the best on the planet. And he knew that to achieve that, the foundation had to be unshakable. Faith in God, loyalty to family, discipline above all. When Khabib entered the UFC, he carried more than his own dreams. He carried Abdulmanap's legacy, his people's pride, and the weight of an entire philosophy. Each victory was a validation of years of sacrifice, early mornings, and silent pain. Abdulmanap rarely craved the spotlight, but behind the scenes, every move was his. Every feint, every takedown, every strategy. It all bore his signature. Fighters from across the region began to seek his mentorship. Because when you train under a man who crafts champions with no compromise, you become something more than just a fighter. You become a force. In the shadows of every post-fight celebration, Abdulmanap remained stoic. No cheers, no boastful words, just a nod of quiet satisfaction. His focus was never on moments, but on missions. Khabib's rise was only one chapter. The real goal was to create a system so effective, so deeply rooted, that it would continue to produce champions long after he was gone. And that's exactly what happened. Fighters like Islam Makhachev, Umar Nurmagomedov, and others weren't outliers. They were products of Abdulmanap's relentless machine. A machine that didn't just churn out wins, but turned humility, strategy, and sacrifice into weapons. What set his students apart wasn't just skill, it was composure under chaos. They didn't panic when pressed. They didn't collapse under pressure, because Abdulmanap trained them to expect war. Every sparring session was a simulation of violence. Every drill, a test of will. When the lights were on and millions were watching, his fighters walked in like it was just another day in the mountain gyms of Dagestan. They fought with a code: controlled aggression, strategic dominance, and zero emotional leakage. That wasn't an accident. That was Abdulmanap's programming in full effect. Cold, precise, and unrelenting. And yet, beneath the layers of discipline and tactical genius was a father, stern but deeply protective. His love for Khabib was ironclad, expressed not in soft words, but in sacrifice and shared purpose. When Khabib won the title, he didn't celebrate like most fathers would. Instead, he reminded him of the responsibility now on his shoulders. "Now the hard part begins," he said, because Abdulmanap didn't believe in resting on greatness. He believed in sustaining it, evolving it, passing it on. And that's what made him more than just a coach. He was a living system of excellence. In 2020, the world lost him. A virus may have taken his breath, but not his presence. His influence didn't fade, it multiplied. Across continents, fighters still invoke his name. They train using his methods, honor his code, and carry his lessons like scripture. The gym in Dagestan, where it all began, remains sacred ground. To step on its mats is to step into Abdulmanap's domain. And in every takedown, every submission, every bowed head before combat, you can still feel him. Not as a memory, but as a force that refuses to vanish. Even in death, Abdulmanap achieved something few can: immortality through impact. His system didn't just elevate Dagestani fighters, it changed the global landscape of MMA. Where once strikers ruled, now grapplers from the mountains hold dominion. They suffocate, control, and conquer with ruthless precision. And every time an analyst mentions Dagestani dominance, whether they know it or not, they're speaking Abdulmanap's name. He didn't just create fighters, he created a philosophy, one that said humility is strength, preparation is power, and legacy is built one silent sacrifice at a time. Khabib's retirement wasn't just about stepping away undefeated. It was a final act of loyalty. He had promised his father that he would stop fighting once the mission was complete. And true to Abdulmanap's code, he did. No farewell tours, no comeback teases, just a quiet exit in victory with purpose fulfilled. That's the kind of discipline Abdulmanap instilled, a discipline that outlived him. Khabib's retirement wasn't a loss to the sport. It was a tribute to the man who made him. A gesture that echoed far beyond the cage into the hearts of millions who had come to respect the Nurmagomedov name.